My name is Josh Miller. I own Riverstone Kennels, and I've been training gun dogs for more than 16 years. I have field trialed, I've hunt tested, but at the end of the day, I'm a duck hunter. You might find that the duck in our Duck Dogs podcast is spelled uniquely. The UK stands for my British Labs. I love my British Labs. I love what they offer me, both as a part of my family and the high motor in the field. As you're going to find, I have some pretty special dogs. Follow along in our podcast series here as we talk about both in the field hunting and in the field training situations that will hopefully help you progress with your dog at home. A big thank you to DUK for bringing you this podcast. DUK Premium Performance Sport 3020. That is what my dogs are on, and I'm a big believer in the food. I'm a big believer in myself. What I eat, what I put into my body fuels me. Same thing with these dogs. DUK Premium Performance Sport 3020. Highly recommend it. Also, Gun Dog Supply, one-stop shop for anything that you need, training, hunting. It is a hunting and a gun dog centric establishment, which is very unique. So www.gundogsupply.com. And also thank you to Sitka Gear. Sitka, I've said in the past, it has changed the way that I hunt and that I train. And especially now in the summer, like we're definitely seeing, the results of that. You just stay more comfortable in the proper clothing, and I thank Sitka Gear for supplying that and making such a premium product. So go check them out, www.sitkagear.com. So I hope everybody had a great weekend, and we're kind of rolling through another week. And up here in Wisconsin, it is getting very warm. We hit our first 90-degree days, and I know some of my friends from down south are going, we were looking at that in the rearview mirror, and but this is quite frankly what I love about living up here as far as it goes for training is that we get all summer of like really nice training weather. Some of these days that it does get really warm, we have to start super early. But we're so blessed to have these great summer and spring days. And so we're enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. I love this part of the year because we're finally kind of getting into the meat of the training, right? So like the dogs that came in for this, the yard work, because, they're transitioning to the field. The dogs that came into advance are kind of done with more of the very kind of slow, monotonous things, and they're getting to be, more fun. It's just kind of a fun overall place in the training. We're starting to see some of this stuff kind of take shape, and that's always a fun thing for us. And I was planning on coming on today and talking a little bit about that, and talking about some of the training that I've been doing, and a couple examples I want to talk about. But right before I sat down to do this, I received an email, and it just kind of changed my plan. So I'm going to talk about something completely different than what I planned on. And so Rick, I hope I get your last name right, Rick Shimanek, he sent me an email, and I'm going to read the email because I think it's a good one, and we get a lot of questions on it. And I'm not going to do a crazy deep dive, but I think this will be an interesting topic to talk about today. So Rick said, titled podcast question, and said, regarding hard mouth, what is your definition? Can a dog be rehabilitated after a history of mauling birds? And in training, what steps can be taken to prevent this habit? There's a lot going on in that question. It sounds, pretty brief. Just, 2 full sentences, 3 sentences, but there's a lot in that. And there's a lot that I think we can talk about. And so what I want to do is I want to just start at the beginning of that question, which is hard mouthing. Like, what is the definition of hard mouthing? You guys are probably, you've heard me talk about in the past, like that I put such an emphasis on the mouth when it regards to the puppies, that I'm creating. Is that the right word? The producing. that when I use my studs and choose my females that I'm using, it's very mouth centric. Like I want and I really believe that mouth is a natural trait, and I put a lot of pride in that. And so when I talk about hard mouthing, there's a lot of extremes. Just like any negative trait, there's always going to be levels to it, right? So hard mouthing could be as much as, and this doesn't matter if it's a bumper or a bird or any kind of dummy. We see it more on the birds, but you see a lot of dogs will be, if they're hard mouth, they'll be hard mouth across the board. So not all, but some. Hard mouthing is when the dog is at all mouthy, specifically with a bird, when they're on the retrieve, when they get back to you. This could be as much as they're just squeezing and putting pressure, on that bird. We have had the extreme that I literally am on top of a dog, grabbing the bird as the dog is swallowing the bird, and everything in between. It is not uncommon for us to see dogs, dogs we have not bred, dogs that come in for training, that they go out and get a bird, and by the time we get that bird back, it looks like, half pound of ground beef in our hand, because that dog is chomp, 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 chomp. And I think there's a lot, we could go a number of different ways with this right now. But I want to talk specifically about the breeding side of it first, because I do wholeheartedly believe that the mouth comes and stems from the lines. It comes from mom and dad and grandpa and grandma. And this is where I believe, and I feel like I can speak pretty objectively to this because I train a lot of American Labradors. My first real big dog, when I say big dog, like accomplished dog, he was an American, dog. I really feel like this is where we kind of failed as far as the retrievers go, right? Because these dogs are very incredible as far as what we can teach them. And I'm going to talk about force fetching and that train retrieve here later on. But if a dog was very driven, if the dog had the talent, but was super mouthy, chomp, 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 hard mouth, would shake, do anything like that, well, we would just force fetch them and, eliminate that habit. And then the dog would be able to push to be something accomplished, and then we would breed with that dog. Well, aren't those puppies still going to get what was natural in that dog? They're certainly not going to get what was trained in. They're going to receive naturally what was naturally given to them. I guess I don't understand. Once in a while I'll get some pushback on that. Like, I don't see how you can argue that. Like, that what is natural is going to be passed on, right? I think it's great you can train it, and that's what we'll talk about here in a second. Like, you can, fix this problem. But going back to breeding, like, I think this is where you can make a naturally a naturally soft mouth dog hard mouth by doing a lot of bad habits, right? Like giving them squeaky toys, giving them things to chomp and shake on, and then that becomes a habit, right? But to take a naturally hard mouth dog and try to make them soft mouthed, I mean, it's a difficult task. And then breeding wise, so with my personal dogs have not been force fetch, have not been gone through the train retrieve. The reason being is that I want to, when someone comes out to my kennel and wants to see the dogs, I want to show them what was natural in their mouth, because again, that's a huge point of emphasis for my breeding program. So I want to show that off. That is the only reason why they haven't gone through it. But I want to talk about that force fetch and trained retrieve. But let me skip back one step of this question before I go into that. The mauling birds. Okay, so I think it was worded. Let me jump back here. It was worded. Can a dog be rehabilitated after a history of mauling birds? Well, first let's define history. History, is it a month? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? The longer that goes, just like any habit, the harder it's going to be to break. And sometimes, again, just like any habit, Sometimes you get to a point that it's just too tough, you can't get over it. So it's a hard one to answer just off of this, but here's what I can tell you. You've probably heard me talk about in these past episodes that I am really big on not hunting my dog that first season as a young pup. So many of us want to because we're so eager. We got this dog as a hunting dog. We need to get this dog out in the field, and we justify it so many reasons, right? Like, I want to get him this experience. I want him, to learn what he's doing. I want to get some feathers in his mouth, blah, 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 blah. All that we're trying to do is we're trying to sugarcoat and say, that you're going to show your dog bad habits. You're going to put him in situations to fail. But we're just going to accept it for our own personal reasons. And then potentially in some areas, things like this come up. Well, he was mauling birds the whole first season. And then, springtime was, my son had baseball, my daughter had dance. I was going 100 different ways, and I started a new job and everything else. Well, now it's midsummer. Oh, now I got to get him back in shape. I got to get him doing something, and it leads into year 2. And you go let them maul birds again, right? Mauling birds, I am assuming this is a very extreme hard mouth. Just the word mauling kind of jumps out at you, right? Like extreme. Probably going to be a hard one, assuming that this has gone on, for any extended period of time for sure. But this is why I want to wait. I know that I'm in a unique and an advantageous situation to do this because I have other dogs, right? Like, it's easy for me to sit a dog for a year or season because I have other dogs to hunt. I get that. But if you're also looking at this one dog is, God willing, a 15-year commitment, that if he's not ready, like, why throw him out there? Just because you're going to create more work for yourself. It's just a thought. As we go through this, you look at, anytime we're talking about any kind of potential bad habit, it's something that it's easier to nip in the bud right away, fixed right away, than have this habit and fight with it and try to work. It's easier just to, let's just stay on that flat road. It's easier to stay on the flat road than create hills for yourself. But let's talk about force fetching. This is a topic, again, when I say I'm not going to deep dive into it, like, I'm not going to say, like, step 1, this is what you do. Step 2, this is what you do, right? But I want to talk about it for a number of reasons. One is I'm seeing more and more trainers talk about that they don't do this or they don't believe in this, okay? As a professional trainer, your job is to take a dog and get the most out of that dog, right? So, for me, if somebody brings me a dog to the kennel, Riverstone Kennel, somebody brings a dog to my kennel and says, he's a part of my family, I love this dog, but he's chompy on his birds, I need to fix that, or he's not finishing his retrieves, I need to fix that. Right? I'm not going to look you in the eye and be like, sorry, man, you should have bought a better puppy. If he's not naturally soft-mouthed, I'm not going to fix it. I don't believe in it. I might believe that that dog shouldn't be bred. I might believe that dog might not have, not in all cases, in some, maybe not as high as a natural ceiling, right? But I can't look that person in the eye and say, this is a part of your family. He's not going to make it, because I don't believe in this. It is my job to get them there. But I want to take you back on force fetching. Let's define force fetching. Force fetching is a process that you take to, the idea is to teach the dog how to properly hold something in their mouth and to properly hold on to whatever it is we're asking them to until we ask them to drop. Something we don't talk about. It's as much a forced drop as it is a forced fetch. We don't ever talk about the end piece of it, but that's a big deal. We have a lot of dogs who don't want to give something up. That's a part of this process. I'm going to go back to when I was learning and apprenticing and training under different trainers. And this is one of the reasons that I did this, and I tried to work under as many guys as I could. I wanted to get an understanding from a number of different people of what you did, why you did it, and the result that you were going for. Well, force fetching, especially if it's done in a very old school way, is you inflict pain on the dog, and how that dog takes that pain away is they get something in their mouth. Okay? This could be pinching the ears. This could be pulling the toes. This could be, there have been like nasty things done to make that pain. And the reason that they're looking for pain is because they want the dog to, or the idea is that the dog will open their mouth and in a lot of cases scream with that pain, go, ah! And when they open their mouth, you shove something in it, take the pain away, and the idea is pain, something in my mouth goes away. So timing is important, right? But it's very quick, but that's the idea. Most of you listening to this right now are probably sitting there going, there's no way that I would want someone doing that to my dog. And I would agree with you. But years ago, probably 10, 11 years ago, I did it this way. It's the way I was taught. Everybody did it this way. And there were certain ways that I like to do better than the other, but the process was the same. We got to a point, Dave had been training for me for about a year-ish, I want to say. And we would a lot of times do these sessions together because I was trying to teach him at the time yet. We had a little dog by the name of Rosie. I remember her face like it was yesterday. She was up on that table, and I was going through this process with her. She was very soft, as I think, again, I've said before, like I do believe dogs are getting softer. I think they're getting softer because breeders are breeding for softer dogs. Why are breeders breeding for softer dogs? Because you don't find many dogs that are the outside, live in a kennel run 365. They're a hunting tool. They're an object anymore. These dogs are a part of our families. They live inside with us half the time, whether you like to admit it or not. They're laying in bed with you at night. You want a softer mentality dog because you don't want the bull in the china shop. You don't want the dog that can't settle down. You don't want the dog that's pushing on you all the time. So our training styles have to change, right? But this was like the start of when I saw that big trend. So Rosie, we were on day probably 3 or 4, if I remember right. And we started this process, and I come up to her, and we were using wooden dowels. Is what I would start my process with. I'd start with my hand, but I'd start with wooden dowels just because it was easy, easy to put in the dog's mouth. I could have a bunch of them in my back pocket, so if they dropped it, I could apply pressure again. Boom, 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 right? Well, Rosie, when I came up to her, again, day 3, 4, the look on her face was pure fear. And I remember looking at her for a couple seconds. I had a dowel in my hand. I dropped the dowel, and I looked at Dave, and I said, I'm done with this shit. I'm not doing this anymore. And Dave at the time, you'd have to know Dave. Dave was, especially back then, I'd stay a little quieter. Dave kind of chuckled to himself, and he's like, well, what are you going to do? Because you still got to get her to do it. And at the time especially, like, we were getting dogs in that, they didn't want to retrieve. And we had to, try to, manufacture and teach it. And he's like, so how are you going to get all these other dogs to do it? And I said, I don't know, but we're done with this. Like, this is not okay. And one of the reasons that I hated that process is because I didn't feel comfortable having an owner stand by me and watch me do it. Like, I would have them do it, but I didn't feel comfortable with it. And in my, just trying to be honest, if I have to do something with your dog that I don't think that you could be standing there watching me do it and be okay with, it doesn't feel right, right? So that was one of the reasons I didn't like that process. But again, I can't just say I'm not doing this. Like, you still have to get the result, and through the process, I'll fast forward. There are other benefits of it too. But this is what bothers me when I hear these people or trainers say that I don't believe in this. Like, I don't do, like, when I hear that, like, I think my first thought is you've probably never done it. And then the second thing is there's other benefits than just picking something up. Like, and again, you have a job. Like, you have to get a dog from point A to point whatever you guys decide on the scale. But if you have a dog that doesn't want to pick something up, so what do you do? So what I did, I sat back and I utilized a lot of resources. University of Minnesota, University of Iowa, University of Tennessee were three big ones. Also, University of Michigan State, because I had a friend of mine that went to veterinary school over there. And I talked with vets, and I talked with animal psychologists, and I tried to understand the mind. Again, you've heard me talk about the mental side of things. Like, I'm a big mental-driven person. There has to be something in a dog's head that what we're doing is counterproductive. And there is, right? So when you start looking at, let's just put this in layman's terms. You step back, okay? You take a dog that was bred to love one thing more than anything else in this world, which is retrieve. That dog does love retrieving more than anything else in this world. Wants to do this all the time, loves doing it. Now we're going to take that, we're going to look at this dog and say, all right, Duke, you love to do this. Now I'm going to inflict pain on you and make you do it my way. A little crazy, right? A little backwards, wouldn't you say? But it was an old school process. And again, that old school process, it worked great with old school mentality dogs. That you could put a bunch of pressure on, they just push through it, right? We're not dealing with that today. So, redirect. I'm not going to tell you what my process is. I know that might disappoint some people out there. It was years of developing. So, talk with these vets, talk with these, they're professionals. They're professionals in their field. And what I did is I created a step-by-step process that I could still teach the dogs how to use their mouth. I could still teach them the act that I needed them to do and finish. I could teach them this process, but I could do it in a confident building manner. All great. The one downside, it takes longer to do. But the end result, I think, is so much more appealing. I think it's so much more fun. I mean, the dogs, you look at a dog and you watch their body language. When a dog goes through my process, when I tell them to fetch, whether it's out of my hand, off the floor, off the ground, whatever it is, boom, they'll grab it. They're confident. They're happy. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. They're not head goes down, ears go back, I have to do this or else there's a bunch of pressure coming, right? That I think that, and the reason, going back, why I'm not going to walk you through, at least right now, step by step, how I'm doing this is because it's a little bit of my secret sauce. I believe it's one of the reasons we've been as successful as we've been over the years. It took years to develop this. It took years out of my life, my time. Took a lot of giving people training for free to use their dogs as tests as you go through this. Like, there's a lot that went into it, but the end result I'm so happy with. And I'm not even saying that we're done with it. We're still we still tweak here and there. I mean, that was a long time ago. But this goes to training in general. Like, if you're not adapting, you're not going to stay with it, right? As far as if I stayed with my old school style approach that I had learned, 15 plus years ago, I don't believe I wouldn't be successful with these dogs today. I had a mentor of mine probably about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, call me. He was like, Josh, I'm just calling to let you know that I'm retiring. I was kind of shocked. Like, he's definitely of age to retire, but I was a little shocked because I knew that he loved it. And I was like, just out of curiosity, why? Like, are you guys, just done and, booking out, moving to Florida? Like, what are you doing? And he's like, to be honest with you, it's become frustrating for me that my approach and the way that I've done things, all these years and been very successful with, he's a field trial trainer, very successful. I don't feel like I can communicate with these dogs like I know how to. I'm, more heavy-handed. I'm more high pressure. And he very respectfully, like he did this in the right way, but it was still a different approach. Well, that's when he's like, that's why you've been successful. That's why you've done and accomplished the things you've done, is because you had a way of adapting. You looked at things differently. He's like, for me, like, I've done this for, 40 years. I've done it the same way. Like, I'm not going to learn something new. The way he put it, he's like, I'm an old dog. You're not gonna teach me a new way of living life. And I respected that. Now, him being him, he's found other ventures and has continued to be very successful in other avenues. But it was just kind of neat to me that other people are seeing this. This is also where I think I talked about a few episodes back, soft dogs, and why sometimes people will talk about soft as a negative. I think this is the only reason that soft is ever considered a negative, is because the person calling the dog soft doesn't understand how to handle that. They're used to hard-headed, push-on-you dogs, and there's nothing wrong with that. Different mentality, different approach. But if they can't switch, if they can't adapt, like, that's when you start, and I would say the same vice versa. Like, I would say the same thing with someone that is used to dealing with soft dogs and goes, geez, that dog is too much. It's hard-headed. It's too much dog. It's all this stuff. Well, is it that, or is it just, you don't know how to take it to that step as a trainer, as a handler, right? Like, to me, that's part of our job. Adapt to the dog. These are not cookie cutters. They're not pieces of dough. You just have a cookie cutter and go boom, 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 and knock everybody out. And if you do that, or if you try to do that, you're going to cut edges off, right? Because these dogs are not the same piece of dough, and then naturally, if you try to force everything inside the cookie cutter, it's not going to fit. So it just doesn't work well with the dogs of today, and I just think the trainers of today, again, because they're part of our family. It's my job. It is at my kennel, Dave's job, and everyone that we have here, is our job to take the dog for the individual who they are and get the most out of them. That's it. I don't know if you can hear that airplane going over or not, so I'm going to just pause for 1 second as it goes over. We live next to a little regional airport, and days like today, that's really nice. It's like, might as well be the Minneapolis airport. It's all the time. All right. That's also why I call it the trained retrieve. I just feel like force fetch has such a negative association to so many people, that you're going to hammer on my dog, you're going to, force them, you're going to do all this stuff, right? That's why I call it the train retrieve. Not only does it soften up, it just tells people this is different. Now, more and more people I'm noticing are starting to call it the train retrieve, and I know they're not doing it our way. And so now I'm probably going to have to come up with some other way of saying it to communicate it, but that's why I call it the train retrieve. Now, here's the other side of it. I mentioned this earlier. There's more benefits to it. Okay? So let's just say you take a dog that is pretty naturally mouthed and does all the stuff, like, that's part of our program setup, is that you don't have to take a dog through the whole thing if they're very natural, right? We can just hit different points of it. But when you start putting rules around the game, and they start doing it for more reasons than just because they want to, you're formalizing it. You're making it understood to them that this is a job, that this is how they do their job. You're telling them this is the parameters in which you do your job to do this right. I believe there is more teamwork, there's more understanding, and there is more confidence, is probably the right way to put it, in going out and doing their jobs, whether it's simple marking or whether it's getting down into blind retrieves, because you've now taught them what the job is. How many times have you been out in the field, whether it's specifically hunting, when a dog has not been through this, has not been taught what the word fetch means? And they're out there and someone's like, fetch it up, fetch it up, fetch it up. The dog doesn't know what fetch means. No idea. It's like me yelling, at you, come here in Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish, it's just me yelling. Unless you've taught the dog what it is you're asking them to do, how can you expect them to do it, right? And so, again, some of these dogs that I'm breeding for, I want them to be extremely natural with their mouth, extremely natural with that retrieve. So then what we do is we just put those little bit of tweaks on it at the end, going, great, you love how to do this. Now we're just going to put a little tweak on it and teach you, like, this is your job. You know it's your job, but you know it's your job because mom and dad and grandma told you it's your job. Now we're just going to take a little time to show you that this is your job because this is your part of our team. And we're going to work together to go forward. Again, whether it's marks, whether it's single, double, triple marks, whether it's blind retrieves, so it's everything we do going forward. We're going to do this as a team. That's one of the things you get out of this process. That's one of the things that you really see at the end of it, is that these dogs have an understanding and appreciation for their role in the team. That's a big deal. It's something to, I think appreciate, but it's something that I think you need to look at if you are, or if you have been, anti-force fetch person, and I call it force fetch just because that's what everyone knows it as. Mine is train retrieve. If you're an anti-train retrieve person, if you're nervous about it, like, there's a reason you go through the process. Okay, it just gives you a much better understanding and a much better flow of that team. Don't just say I don't believe in it. You haven't done it. Walk through that process more times than not, and I would say not even more times, most times. People that go through it, if I walk them through it, I tell them how to do it, what to do at home, the response is, when they get done with it, what a difference. What a difference this is. Again, I'm not saying go buy or breed naturally unmouthed or naturally mouthy dogs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm 100% against that. But Michael Jordan didn't become Michael Jordan just because he was naturally gifted at it. He had to learn the game, he had to learn the rules, and he had to learn, this is how I do this to be successful. This is my job. This is my role. That's all we're doing through our train and retrieve process. So going back to one of the questions here in this email is, in training, what steps can you do to prevent this? Like, I think part of it, going back to, don't let them have a bad habit to begin with. If you see this stuff early on, nip it in the bud, and you have to go through the training process from start to finish. But I'd also say, this train and retrieve process. So at this point, just because I'm just not ready, to let this out yet, send them in to me and I'll take care of it. That'd be the best way. But don't let them get that far down the road. Don't let them get to the point that that they're chomping and shaking and making ground beef out of these. Like, that is crazy. It's to me, it's really what is, when I hear people breeding their dogs because it's a quote unquote great dog. This is a lot of the stuff that is never taken into consideration. We just talked today in the office today. One of Dave knows these people. Chloe, who's also one of my employees, knows these people, and they're selling these chocolate lab puppies. And we actually have a client that called and said, hey, I have a friend of mine. He's not a hunter. He's not an outdoorsman. He wants specifically a chocolate lab. Doesn't, he just can't afford to pay a bunch for it, and just wants this as a home companion, right? So I was like, well, because it came up in our conversation. Okay, well, these people have a litter that I know of, and they're a backyard breeder, so they can't be that expensive, And so I was like, call over there, and I'm like, hey, introduce myself. This is who I am. $1,500. They want it for these puppies. No testing of any kind. No health testing, period. No, of course, no titles, right? Nothing proven with these dogs. But mom and dad were great dogs. And so I started, when I asked about the health, testing, the comment that the lady made was, yeah, a lot of people have asked about that. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Please do your homework before buying puppies. It's one of those things, like, I am not even passing that name or that litter on to my client to give to his friend, because I would feel awful if I talked to my client, a year or two from now, and he tells me what the health issues these dogs are having. I'm doing this guy a favor. He doesn't even know I'm doing it. I'm not going to pass on this name. But, obviously a lot more to it. You think those dogs are very naturally mouthed? I can't say because I haven't seen them, but I'm going to have a hunch that no. I have a hunch that if the health wasn't even a priority to look at, there probably was a lot of other factors in there that weren't looked at. So, going back to the beginning, hard mouthing, like, definitely something to look at. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Definitely something that you can take a naturally soft mouth dog and watch them develop a bad habit. Okay, we need to nip it in the bud. We need to keep them that soft mouth. There's way too many reasons of why to have this done that, just making an excuse for it and letting it get worse and worse is just going to get to, that habit you can't come back from. And it's gonna hurt you in a lot of different areas too. So, thank you, Rick, for the question. Completely aside, this was more like a soapbox than anything else, because I wasn't planning on this, so I just completely winged this whole thing. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed it. Thank you to Lucky Duck for sponsoring the show as well. If you guys have not seen their Lucky Duck kennel, they have an intermediate. They now have a large. Both are 5-star crash test rated. And for as much as we put into our dogs, wouldn't making them travel in a safe crate, be a priority we should put? I think so. So, anyways, thank you guys again for spending yet another week with me. I'm going to get back out and finish my yard work as I wrap up for the day. And I hope that you all have a great, great week and a great weekend. And I will talk with you next week. See ya. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Leave us a review on iTunes, and a special thank you to DUK, because without them, we couldn't do what we do here, bringing this information to you.